Writers, agents, and publishers, for the first time since the Gutenberg Press, find themselves lost in a maze of mystery as technology alters the shape of the publishing industry. Searching for Answers is a group of writers throwing pop culture, writing, and publishing into a crucible of clarity, passion, and humor. This group is the Right Pack. In this episode of Right Pack Radio, the Right Pack is going to discuss writing words versus writing pictures. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Right Pack Radio. This is your host and producer, David Allen Lucas, president of Winding Trails Media, president of St. Louis Writers Guild, author of Crazy Things, and I have been reformed. I have gone from being a pantser, now apparently, to a plotter. The current novel I've been working on, the plot should be done by now since we are recording into the future. Really, since it should be done tomorrow. And then off to the writing. In the past. Tomorrow in the past.
Now you're just complicating it.
I know I do. Don't I complicate it all the time?
He overcomplicates his plot, which is why he's redoing it.
Yes, and I had to redo the plot.
I'm still waiting for, a story.
Finished? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's coming after all this time of being in hiatus. And with me today is the Madame of Murder herself, back with us today.
Fedora Amos. I write Victorian whodunits like Jack the Ripper in St. Louis and Mayhem at Buffalo Bill's Wild West. And coming before too long, I hope, have your ticket punched by Frank James. Also, I want to tell you where I'm going to be next. It'll be April the 11th at Left Bank Books. I am interviewing Jill Orr.
And this is at Left Bank Books in St. Louis.
Yes, in the Central West End. Jill Orr is also a sister in crime, and she has a new book out. She is from Columbia, and the new book is called Bad Break. And she writes funny mysteries. I love her stuff, and I'm delighted to be able to interview her at Left Bank Books, April the 11th, 7 o'clock. Come out and see us. It's going to be fun.
Nice.
And for the master artist herself.
The visual portion of our demonstration.
Yes.
My name is Jennifer Stolzer. I'm a children's book author and illustrator. My fantasy novel, Threadcaster, is available on Amazon and signed copies you can order through Main Street Books in St. Charles. The big news for me, I suppose, is I'll be launching another picture book with Jessica Matthews, the author of Pirate Princess. This one is equally pink and sparkly, but has fewer pirates. And that will be...
and more princesses?
Well, more ballerinas this time.
Oh, ballerinas.
Ballerinas.
Okay.
So it's called Sparkle. It's the story of a honey badger who decides she wants to be a ballerina and forcibly joins a young girl's ballerina troupe. We'll have a signing for that, a launch party on April the 28th at Main Street Books in St. Charles.
Excellent.
So bring your little ballerinas or your little honey badgers, whichever ones want to come. We'll take costumes for either, I guess.
Sounds really interesting.
Yeah, so it's I'm still working on that one, but it'll be out by I guess this time next month then.
Yes.
Yeah.
You threw me off so bad. I thought you were talking about you were working on honey badger costumes.
Oh yeah,
And also with us, joining us again, is
Dante Carlisle, author of crime fiction. I just released my newest novel, Dire Hope. It is available on Amazon, and I'm not appearing anywhere anytime soon. So.
excellent. And also with us is the Commodore Sky Pirate himself of steampunk.
Yeah, I don't know how we settled on Commodore, but
You did. You settled on the last time.
I just reminded you it was another level in the chain of command.
I think the goal is for you to get promoted every time you're on.
In that case, we stuck at Admiral. So
Yeah.
Admiral. You can't get much higher.
Well, now you're gonna be a space commander.
Field Marshal. No,
Yeah,
that's
Field
bad.
That Field Marshal is on
I
the
was
ground.
thinking of the cool, the one in space with the bugs.
The one in space with the Starship Troopers?
Thank you, Starship Troopers.
Okay.
Yeah.
You just be the psychic weirdo.
That's what they had people above
Anyway.
Admiral and stuff. Anyway, I'm Brad Arcook. I write steampunk, which is why they keep trying to give me all this weird stuff. And you can find the Iron Chronicles out there. You can find Steam Tree, the Airdranium Adventures out there. And now, because we're in the future here, you can definitely check out Tales of the Gear Blade, Episode 1 and Episode 2 are out, and if it's in March, then, Episode 3 is probably rolling out right around here, too. So look for those all. You can find them all at bradrcook.com. You can get books, you can get free books, you can get all kinds of stuff. Check it out.
Free box.
And also with us today is the woman who has to put up with me on a constant basis.
I'm Melanie Lucas, and I have done no writing this week, actually I have, but I have done no writing for myself this week, all for my job.
Yeah.
But I am very slowly working on a fantasy novel.
And if you would like to see the Right Pack and interact with Right Pack live, come to GatewayCon. GatewayCon is a writers' conference, writers' retreat, and a book fair happening over Father's Day weekend in St. Louis. Go to www.stlwritersguild.org and look at GatewayCon. At GatewayCon on Sunday, which is Father's Day itself, we will be doing a live broadcast in front of a live audience. So, stay tuned. Today we're going to talk about writing words versus writing pictures. And what is that? What do we mean by writing pictures versus writing words?
Typography.
Hey,
Hieroglyphics.
Hieroglyphics, yes.
We have
It's
returned to
writing
those.
pictures.
There you go. That is writing pictures. That's true.
No, seriously, guys.
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously writing words is what we all do. We use words to describe images. Those images create, stories, plots, characters, and all the rest of that kind of fun stuff. So that's writing with words. And then writing with pictures is, I guess, picture books?
No, writing with pictures is the way that we're defining it here today is to
Thank you.
write in ways that evoke visual imagery.
Yes.
Right, visual imagery in your readers' minds. Be that in books, plays, or any kind of scripts.
Or if you would like to hear us talk about writing picture books, vote on Facebook, because I'll just talk about picture books for an hour.
Well, no, since we're recording in the future, they can't see this.
Well, future episode.
Future episode. We can definitely cover that. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to throw out that to evoke imagery when you use words instead of, pictures. To be honest, what you're really having to do is create the entire scene, create all the mental cues that are going to make the reader's imagination fire off and suddenly start imagining the picture that you want them to imagine. And we do that the way we always do with the senses, the hearing and touch and seeing and taste and smell and all of those kinds of things, and then giving enough visual clues to fill in detail work, like, how big it is, or how the texture of something, or, those kinds of details, and then a little bit of imagination on the reader's part to let them fill in the gaps.
Fedora?
I think your goal is to put the reader into the story, or the story into the reader's mind, to ground them so that they believe that whatever place or whatever it is you're describing is an actual place or an actual person. It is to make them somehow identify enough with your setting, your characters, whatever it is you're describing, so that they feel a part of it. Because after all, let's face it, most of the book, all of the book really, takes place in your reader's head. It's not in anything you say or do, it's in their head. So you gotta get it in their heads if you can.
Jen, and that guy won't come back here, and I've got you, Brad, as well. But Jen, if you would, go ahead.
Well, I would offer that writing in pictures is equal to drawing pictures. Being a picture drawer person, I agree with everything everyone said. You got to use your senses and description and color and all of that. But really, writing in pictures is composing something. So when you are writing a story, you can say, I walked into the room, there was 4 walls, a ceiling, a mirror on a wall above the couch, the piano on the wall on the other side, several people sitting around talking about writing. That you can describe all those things, or you can draw attention to something. I've walked into the room and I was immediately, it's like I found this piano and it looked like it had been unused except for storage. And it's, and the fact that my character noticed that part not only describes the scene, but also describes the character and what's important to them and how they receive information from their environment. And by describing it in a visual way or a sensual way, then you have the experience of seeing it yourself, and also that you were there doing the experiencing instead of just, here is a picture of a room, and then leaving the audience to sort of decide what's the most important part.
Brad?
Yeah, and I would add to that, or kind of just even jump on with that, that knowing which details to pick are important, because when you walk into the room, a defining feature that would help you describe this room in writing would be the piano. You don't really need to let them know that there was a mirror on the wall. It has no relevance, unless of course it comes into play and you need to see all of that. But that can come later down the story. The reality is knowing which details to hit, and this is something I run into in fantasy. I write a lot of fantasy, which means that I am not grounded in the real world, which means that I have to put them in a situation that feels real and give them enough description of what they're in so that it can, be plausibly real. And by doing so, by hitting senses that they know, hitting keys that they know, hitting on mental cues that make them think certain things, then I know my reader is going to be thinking the same thing that I'm trying to make them think. I.e. that an airship can actually have cannons and armor on the sides of it and still fly via hydrogen and other, fun lighter than air type craft. The reality of that is totally fiction. But if you give it the right cues and you give it the right kind of, sounds, and if the right details are included, then it becomes plausible. And at that point, the suspension of disbelief will happen, and your reader will believe that this airship can actually fly and fight battles in the sky. And once you've done that, you don't need to, as Fedora was mentioning earlier, now they're in the story, they're grounded in the story, and I can do whatever I want on that ship, and people will, understand it and know it, but it's by painting that picture that in the first place you'll go, oh yeah, I can totally believe that the Sparrowhawk is real.
The word of the day is verisimilitude.
Verisimilitude. Oh, that's a good word.
Which is the appearance of being true.
Yes.
Melanie, and then...
We've been talking around this, but one of the things you have to keep in mind is who your audience is. I think this is why a lot of people that aren't fans of fantasy, because they don't like investing so much to learn the new world. It's a problem I have with getting into a new series, namely I have to get into the world. And once I'm into the new world, like, oh, I love this series, but the first book really drags because you need that details to get into the new world. But if you go to 19th century literature, I'm just blanking, but
I'll take Jane Austen.
yeah, Jane Austen, who was thinking of Pride and Prejudice, all that. Those are practically travel logs. They are filled with tons of descriptions, and if you do that today, most editors would just cross out most of the descriptions. She wrote well before Google. So, you have to keep in mind who's reading it and how much detail do they need. Even for a fantasy, it seems like we're needing less today.
She wrote largely before travel as well.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
that what you're
was
reading
one of it.
instead of going to this place.
Right.
So.
And I want to come back to that in a minute. Go ahead, go ahead.
Yeah, that was actually whatever my two first.
Yeah, I just called
two
Carlisle.
first
Like, wait a minute, that's wrong.
I
That-
you'll have to forgive me. I don't remember if you wanted to go by your actual name or your pen name. So what did you say was the name that we were going to call
Dante.
you? Dante. Okay, good.
Yes, indeed. So that's I'm kind of actually dovetailing off of that. That's the biggest choice that you have to make is how much description are you going to put in it? How widely are you going to paint the picture? And what kind of story are you writing? How quick of a pace are you writing it? And that actually comes into it with particular scenes, because obviously if you want a faster paced scene, you're going to put a lot less description into it. If you want something a little slower paced, give the reader something to kind of relax from the fast paced scenes on either side, you're going to put more description. And I love the mention of exactly what you show the reader says not only something about the scene and the place that you are, but a lot about the character themselves. What are they going to notice? Because you're writing, if you're in third person, you know you're writing from their perspective, and what are they going to see, and that's what mattered to them.
Jen, are you dovetailing again, or are you just raising?
Um,
Because if you're just raising, Fedora goes next. If not,
I guess it's a dovetail. I'll be short. I'll be very brief. And describing a character, what they see, action scenes. Rephrase. In an action scene, you're picking your actions based on what your character will notice. And when you're being punched, they notice the fist coming at them. If they notice the clock on the wall while they're being punched, that clock must be very important. Because that's your inclusion into the scene. Yeah. It's like, while I was being punched, that clock was so important I was distracted from the fact that I was almost punched. So that's a scene painting, an action scene painting moment, and the audience will remember that clock because it's such a point of interest within the scene. If you were describing a whole room full of furniture and you notice the clock, we wouldn't remember the clock.
And if you are getting punched and you bring up the clock and it's not brought back into the story, it's kind of one of those questions like why the hell?
Yeah, that's Chekhov's gun. If there's a gun established in the first act, it should be fired by the last act.
Yeah.
he punched me in the jaw so hard I saw 5:02 on the clock and fell. It was 12 o'clock when I woke up. Anyway.
Yeah, see, there you go. That's a good one.
Fedora.
I think Brad has a very important point about word economy. And as an exercise, I would suggest that everybody, even if you never plan to publish it or do anything with it at all, try a little flash fiction and see if you can put in a single sentence that is so telling that people will remember it. And I will give you an example that I remember. This is from William Faulkner. And I read this book many years ago, too many that I'd even want to tell you, but I still remember it because it so encapsulated the psyche of the person that he was describing and did it in just one sentence. And the sentence is this: he wore a red carnation in his lapel like a merry wound.
I was actually waiting for you to say, my mom is now a fish. That was also from Faulkner. A different one. Different story.
That's a different level of detail there.
There it is. There really is.
Market lag there.
I want to jump a little bit and then go back. We've been talking about story writing and the idea of novels, short stories, etc. In plays, and I would have to turn to Brad on that one because I've not written a play since high school. But I've taken a lot of script writing courses during my hiatus. And when it comes to script writing, you have to be careful of your descriptions. Not only do you not want the people giving you full description, the actors giving you full description in their dialogue. Did you see Jenny jump in that yellow car?
Yeah, I was there.
Okay. Yeah, I was there, exactly.
Dialogue is something different, though. You
It
should
is.
not really be adding description into dialogue unless it's very needed.
Right.
Or it's on the radio.
Agreed. Or it's on the radio.
Well, that's different, yeah.
Yeah. But
Even then, avoid it.
you don't, this is something which every script writer that I've had the pleasure of talking to, learning a little bit from, has said where they laugh at novel writers trying to write TV scripts or trying to write movie scripts is the amount of detail they're trying to give the set directors in the script.
Yeah.
You borrowing from Jen's presentation about a character walks in, sees a used piano, there's a mirror on the wall, etc. It would be written in the script as character enters room, piano, mirror. Just leave it up to the director and the set designers to come up with it. You lose
To be
amount of
honest, you're
control.
just going to say interior.
Yeah, interior, whatever
you
it
know,
is.
Like something like
Yeah.
that. And it's up to them to then create the set and put there. And if somebody interacts with something,
Exactly.
that set direction goes in late,
Yeah.
with that dialogue moment. But that's it. It's not like you're going to put in the beginning that, there needs to be a gun on the table or something like that. Sometimes you will in plays sometimes if you're giving the overall set direction. But in plays evoking
Go ahead.
imagery, is a much different thing because the imagery of a play is obviously the actors and the stage and the sets and everything that's going on. But as a playwright, your job is not only to help craft that, but really it's to evoke the emotion with the words, and then let the emotion of the scene craft the imagery for the audience. So it's a much different way of kind of writing imagery, writing pictures, because you're really doing it through emotion, not just words.
Exactly.
Well, you should do that in your novel writing as well.
You should.
You should. You all should. Everything about this trying to paint the picture, if you will, inside of whoever the reader is, inside their mind. This is a form of psychology and telepathy. And going back to the story, being short stories, novels, writing, is any of your symbolism should be involved in the painting you're trying to paint in the reader's mind. But when do you go from describing the scene to over-describing it? What is too much? What is purpley prose? When do you hit that? And I love how Fedora talked about flash fiction. I think it was Hemingway's and its much-used version was Baby Shoes Never Worn. Baby Shoes for Sale Never Worn. You know immediately everything there.
Mm-hmm.
So when do you hit the purple prose versus a good description?
Well, I will tell you that I have a little formula for a character description. And it is, do it in 3 sentences. That you start with a physical description, then you give an attitudinal description, and then perhaps the view of your central character. And the cat interrupted my little talk there, so I hope I made sense.
I'll take partial blame on that.
Yeah.
So 3 sentences and you're done. If you go much beyond that, I think you start losing people.
Did you just say the word caricature?
Character.
Okay. That is actually the word that I use for it. I've done both in my novels. I've written extremely purple prose, trying to paint a setting beyond what will ever be needed. And then I've also done absolute thumbnail sketches of the character. I highly prefer the thumbnail sketch of the character. Like you see if you go to a carnival, if you've ever had a caricature done of yourself, then it's amazing that the artist can choose.
Sorry guys, we're having a cat fight while I was happening.
Hey,
Literal cat fight.
Literal.
A literal cat fight.
That's not us. That's the cats.
Yeah, the cats are actually having a cat fight. If you go to a carnival or anything else, you have a caricature done. The artist chooses 1 or 2 details about you and can draw a rendering that is recognizable.
If they're any good.
Occasionally.
If they're any good, yes, if a good caricaturist. But that's one of those things that I try to do in writing, is that you find those 1 to perhaps 3 features that really make a person stand out or a character stand out, and you add those in. Everything else, the reader is going to create a picture of this character in their mind, and it may be completely opposite you, except for the fact that they have red hair, a limp, and they're missing 2 fingers on their left hand.
Go ahead. And
I was just thinking that this actually brings up, what matters to the story and what doesn't, because letting the reader fill in the details, even if those details are completely different than what you were seeing, isn't necessarily a bad
It's
thing.
not bad. Everyone's going to read something different.
And along with that, I wish I could remember the name of the author. In fact, I wish I could really remember where I read this at. Was an author went to a library where they were doing a reading group, a book club, and the book club was talking about the character, who was a detective in the story, if I remember correctly. And they were describing the character among the readers, and people were talking about how he had a mustache, and suddenly there was an argument that the guy didn't have a mustache and did, and the author's like, where did that mustache come from? It's what the reader puts into it, and now I'm going to go over to Brad and then to Jen.
Yeah, it's really, how do you avoid purple prose? We've been talking about it. You limit the amount of information you give. You leave it to 3 sentences. You give 3 details. You focus on it. But really, the amount of information you give over time is not as important as the amount of information you give at one time.
Right. Yeah.
Because info dumping is something you want to avoid at all costs. Do not have them walk in front of a mirror and start describing their eyes and their hair and their chin their shape of the chin, and no one cares about any of that. Even to the level of, if I walked into this room, I'm not going to describe the color of the walls. I'm not going to describe each lamp to you. I'm not going to describe the way everything. That's not the way you describe a room. We don't need that level of detail. No one is looking for that level of detail. The only reason it's in a movie is because to fool your eye and make you think that room is actually lived in by an actual human being. Mm-hmm. So that's the only reason detail gets put in visually anyway, is to kind of give it that more richer depth and feel. But over time, as you tell a story, dropping in the fact, new details about a person is a wonderful way of telling a story, because then the details that you're rehashing you're not really rehashing anything, and you can allude to things you've already done, but then you're dropping in something new for the reader to learn a new character trait or a new facet of this person, or the fact that they carry a Samsung and not an iPhone or something. These are things you can come up with later, or not later, but as the story progresses.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Melanie, real quick, and
I
then
was
over to
just
Jen.
thinking this actually brought me to the English language. The descriptions come before the noun. So if it's a big, bright, red blank, and I'm thinking you're talking about a barn, and all of a sudden the noun is a dog, that's going to be really jarring. Mm-hmm. I was just thinking this same type of thing can be happening if you put in the wrong details first. So if you give me a couple of big details, and I interpret the detective, my character, whatever, as a little Asian woman, and then find out later that's, no, not a little Asian woman, it's an Irish man. That's going to be really jarring. It's like, huh, what happened? Then I go back through and like, oh, they actually never said the gender, and oh, they actually never said that, and I wrongly inferred that they were Asian based on X, Y, Z. It's like, but if that severe thing happened, obviously the wrong details were given first. I mean, so.
Jen, and then Fedora.
I got distracted by Melanie's talk about the wrong details when, because I was thinking of a great example of that. While you were talking, I was reading a book, and the character on the cover of the book was a teenage brunette sort of looking like a boy, like wearing an androgynous outfit. And then halfway through the book, she looks in the mirror and talks about how she's blonde and she has giant boobs. And I'm like, hold on, wait a second, I was misled.
Covers will do that to you.
Yes, I would say cover artists, especially on some traditional publishing day, don't look at the story; they just draw.
So, but it's also describing. Now, don't have her look. I wouldn't have had her look in the mirror anyway. Her description of her body was not important to the first half of the book, and I assume it wasn't important to the second half of the book. I actually put the book down after that because I was like, okay, this is lying to me. I'm done. But it's if the physical description of her was so important, then front load that so that we have it the whole way. If it's not important, if it's so unimportant that you don't add it until halfway through, then maybe you don't really need it that much. You can throw in that she's blonde earlier, so we have it in our head that she's blonde, and that could come from the fact that she looks. She's trying to get ready to go in for an interview or something. Notices that there's, she just bleached her hair and now there's long white hairs all over her black sweater, and she's like, dang it, I'm shedding on myself. And it's like, that's a funny moment, describes your character, also describes their hair color. You added it to something else, multitasking.
Right.
I would recommend that you don't say too much or give too much description about characters that are supposed to be nice. And the reason for that
It's an interesting distinction.
yes. Characters that you want to have sympathy for, because people, I think, will readily gravitate to those characters and fill in the blanks with people that they know that are nice.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And so I think you'll get more mileage out of not saying too much about those characters.
You can.
And I'm going to dovetail there. Be it characters or be it scenery, etc. You want to let the reader fill in the details. Don't underestimate their imagination. Go ahead.
I was just thinking of, speaking of filling in the details. Sorry, this probably won't take it off topic.
Please don't.
I'm thinking of the Hunger Games, and I forget which, but there was a lot of people online that
I know the story you're going to bring
that
up.
was mad. If you remember the names, please tell me.
I do. You're
Yes.
You're describing how readers. There's a character in the first book. Her name is Rue, and she's described very clearly as being a black girl.
Mm-hmm.
But she's also described as having reminded Katniss of her younger sister, and her younger sister is described earlier as having blonde hair and blue eyes. So people got in a fight when they cast a black girl to play the black girl in the movie because they remembered the description of how Rue reminded Katniss of her sister and assumed it was because of her physical appearance instead of because of her personage, who she was, and completely ignored the description in the earlier part of the book that said that she had she had coarse hair and dark skin. It's like she's a black girl. Like there is no arguments if you're reading the book. It says that she's black, but they forgot it because the two descriptions were far enough away.
And I've talked to people reading To Kill a Mockingbird that misremembered Scout as being a young boy instead of a young girl.
Huh, that's interesting.
Yeah. Well, it was years ago that they read it, but they remember the story, they really liked the story, but they had forgotten that the main character was a little girl versus the little boy.
It's told in first person, right?
Yes.
So I could only understand that because she wouldn't describe herself in third person.
And she
very
was
often.
so much a tomboy.
Yeah.
And I will say, I will confess, when I read that book originally when I was in school, it took me a couple of chapters to realize, wait, this is a girl, not a boy. So, yeah.
It does, yeah. It's not readily apparent.
No, it's not readily apparent.
Well, I have that issue. I have that very same issue with Gearblade.
Really? Tell us about it.
Gearblade is written in first person, and it stars a woman, Georgia Bennett. And so often when people come to me and talk to me about Gearblade, they will describe Georgia and say he. Because it clearly says Brad R. Cook on the cover, and then it says I all throughout it. And so everyone assumes the I is Brad R. Cook. Well, the I is not Brad R. Cook, it's Georgia Bennett. So it's not something I've had to worry about because both of the Iron Horseman is written in an I as well. And Alexander's the character there, so no one had any problems with that one whatsoever. But so many people have come up to me and will be like, "Oh, I really love him. He's a cool character."
It's like, well, you don't love him well enough. You didn't even notice the
Yeah,
gender.
But it mostly says I. Now I do have characters. It's very clearly stated that she's a woman. People address her as a woman. People address her as Georgia, and stuff like that. But it is a fascinating thing that I have run into that people have this automatic just assumption.
It's
that-
a general
blindness,
PSA.
yeah.
The author is not necessarily the main character of the book.
In addition, Georgia might be the thing that's tripping you up
Yeah.
because it's so close to George.
It is.
And that's the kind of thing you really have to think about as
It
a
is,
writer.
and I actually did that on purpose in a way as well, and it's
Yeah.
a joke that comes up later in the book. But yeah, so the George thing is also
Yeah, because a lot of people just read
right over it. Yeah.
And
Might
when
even be
I,
reading Georgia.
and when I, Brad, you realize this or not, but you just kind of brought up, we did a episode a long time ago on the rules by Elmore Leonard. And one of the things he always talked about was not writing the things that the reader will skip. I know I've just paraphrased that. I missed something in that statement.
You skip the unimportant things.
The unimportant thing.
Yes.
But it's amazing how much, when you're thinking about what you're writing to paint the picture into the into the reader's head, remember, you don't want to write stuff that they're just going to skip. And clearly, in your case, while this is very important that your character's female, clearly, at least the readers who talk to you about it, skip that detail.
It's been kind of amusing, so
Yeah. So with that, I'm going to go ahead, please.
I think it's time for the obligatory talk about the senses and
Capital
sensory
T talk.
description.
Oh,
Yeah,
yes.
I want to start with Jennifer because she entertained us for a half hour before we started to talk today.
Yes,
So Jennifer, go
off
for it.
mic. Jen has started a
I have
tirade.
a-
Here it comes.
I have
Unleash the hounds.
a campaign against the sense words, specifically the words of the senses. Using sensory description absolutely is important. you have to describe how a thing smells, how it feels, the temperature, the color, the sounds you hear in a space. It's like, those are all important, but I don't need to know how you received that information in your body. It smelled like roses. Well, you could just say it was rose scented, or roses, were throughout, or whatever. I know you're receiving the smell through your nose. I guess that was a bad description. It would be, my nose smelled the roses.
Actually,
Or
I would
my
use it earlier.
eyes-
Fear.
Fear? I felt the fear. And it's like, you don't need the felt.
Yeah, felt is rarely a good
Felt
word.
is, I'll remove every felt unless it's the fabric. Because it's like the felt, also seeing. I looked,
Yes.
a description that I've used in a previous talk before. If you say, I saw a crocodile climb into the room, like, it's first person. The fact that you noticed the crocodile is proof you saw it.
Yeah.
And same for third person limited. If the character is telling the story and they mention the crocodile, we can assume that they noticed the crocodile. Because if they didn't notice it, they wouldn't have mentioned it.
Plus, if you just say a crocodile entered the room,
Stronger
you've taken
sentence.
out the eye.
Yes.
And now there's one less eye in the giant myriad of
Eyes.
eyes that will
Yes.
pop up in your book. So-
And it's more immersive to your reader.
It is.
Because your reader also noticed the crocodile.
Yes.
When you say, another example I've used in the past is, he watched Sally walk the dog every day. It's like watching Sally, you could just say, Sally walked the dog every day. And then you've removed that level of distance from the
Well,
experience.
unless he's a stalker and you want to point out
you
that
wanna
he
but
is.
then there's your
very-
motivation. Like
Watch.
my point being,
But
like,
she's still walking the dog every day. He doesn't need to see that,
yeah, and it's if Jeff tasted the delicious soup, and Jeff is your main character, then you can just say the soup was delicious and describe how it tasted. You don't have to say he tasted it because he's giving us that information. When you say he tasted the delicious soup, then we're no longer included in the tasting. We're being told about it after the fact.
Yeah.
And that just little level of distance between your reader and what's going on inside your book might be the difference in an immersion level that makes the reader bored with your book or engaged in your book. And that makes a big, it's different with the different types of writing. Obviously, if you're writing a first-person story or a literary novel where you need to be like really in the head of this character, then you need to be experiencing their life with them so that you're invested in them. If you're writing something, a stalker story, and you don't want to be invested in your character, then say, he watched her walk. Watch him watch her walk, because watching him watch her walking is the important part of that sentence, is that he's watching her. But if you wanted to describe her walking, don't bother with how he witnessed it, because we can make that assumption it's just one step toward the end. Same rules applying for when you do include a sense. Like, there was, oh goodness, I forget her name. There was a speaker to the Writers Guild, and she gave me a quote in her lecture that I should remember because I use it
Megan
often.
Pinson or something
No,
else?
no, this was years ago.
Oh, okay. I don't know.
This it's like, don't tell me the sky is blue.
Yeah.
The sky is always blue. When it turns purple, I want to know.
Susan Ledbetter.
There we go.
Yes,
Thank you.
Thank you. Good recall.
So it's the same thing with, I felt the fear versus I smelled the fear.
I
Okay,
like
now
to.
that's interesting because you can smell fear, as David pointed out to me off mic. You
Smells
can
a
in
lot
fact
like sweat. I
you
think.
can in fact smell fear, but describe that smell
Yes.
as you smell it, because smelling fear is different than feeling it. We
Well-
all know what it's like to feel it, but we don't all know what it's like to smell it.
And it's telling to say you smelled fear.
Yes,
But
telling
to
or showing.
smell the sweat, and to smell the way, to smell the sweat, and to smell that would be what builds it up. But one of the things I want to throw out is, what we're describing here also works for third person. We're only talking about in terms of first person, but if you're writing third person,
Oh yes, yes.
Yes.
you're going to want this level of immediacy. You're going to want to take out the looks and saw, they looked instead of they looked. You don't need they looked or, you don't need that.
In stage direction, telling people where they walked to or what they did there.
Yes.
That's all very telling, and that's all very distant for the audience versus being in the room with them and experiencing what's going on with them. It's that's sort of like going to the heart of our visual imagery.
Exactly. And by doing that, you really kind of improve the immediacy of your story. But when you get rid of all of these seeings and felts and looked and watched and all of these kinds of things, and to the earlier comment, I loved that you came back to it because in the stalking thing, the fact that she's walking her dog is not the important part of that sentence.
Mm-hmm.
The important part of that sentence is that he's watching, so that's what you're going to want. You're not going to want to say he watched. You're going to talk about the leering effect that he's got going on, and that kind of a sense. You're not just going to say he watched her go down the street. It'd be more of a, you're going to put the emphasis on him watching something.
Yeah.
So that's and that's the beauty part of knowing what words to use and where to put your detail levels in, which is kind of what this whole talk's been about, is knowing where to put your detail in.
Composing your page,
Exactly.
writing your picture.
Exactly. Go ahead, Fedora.
I think every writer ought to have a page of words I love to hate. Words that I probably use way too often, that I ought to make a concerted effort to examine every time I try to use them, and put in that list all of these sensory sort of words, words like think and feel and sense, for that matter.
Yeah, sense.
As well as your own personal pet demons. One of mine is just.
Just. That's what I was going to turn out.
Just. No,
And I do that, and I know better, but I do it anyway.
There is no need for the word "just" anywhere. Like I've yet to really find a good
Unless
one.
it's talking about justice.
That'll take justice.
Yeah.
Also for
No, just is a part of justice.
I just walked in the room. Yeah.
for talking about timing.
That we don't do.
Immediacy. Oh, it just happened.
Yeah.
And also, any of these tips we're giving, if it's in dialogue, if someone's talking,
Oh God.
then humans can say whatever they want. They don't
Right.
speak
Oh,
perfect English or in good narration. So
I speaks horrid.
yeah.
Like,
So
super horrids.
just I hate
You give me the
I hate
feels there.
seemed. Seemed is a
That's a
good.
good one.
Good one to avoid to
Yeah,
get an immediate,
seemed.
because it's
Yeah.
like I have like little tricks I do to myself, psychology tricks to get me to not use these. For just, I always say the word just like I hate it. It's like why don't you just calm down? Just.
Yeah,
And then
you
you
don't
go,
need-
why don't you just?
Yeah, began's another one.
Began.
Just do it.
No.
You don't just do
Any
the
of the
action. You don't need to
linking
begin
verbs,
doing
yeah.
the action. You need to start doing the action.
Yes, and the seems, like I always ask, well, is it or isn't it? You're
Yeah.
there. I don't know.
It's
Like,
either happening
it seems
or
dark
is it
in
happening?
here. It's
It's
like
either
I don't know
yes
if
or
it's
no.
dark. Is it dark or not?
Yes.
You tell me if it's
It
dark.
seems
You're
that
there.
way. No, it's either that way or it's not that way.
Yeah, it's like, come on, narrator.
Yeah.
I'm trusting you with this.
And you guys have just outlined something very important, whether or not you realize this or not. And that is the editing and rewriting of the story to make it better. This applies to this as well. If you are writing your first draft, which everybody, hopefully, I know everybody around the room knows this, hopefully everybody listening to us knows, and excuse my language, your first draft is always shit.
It's a shitty
It's
first-
horrid. It will hopefully never see the light of day. Suggestion: burn it before you die. So
After
you're
you revise it.
after you've revised it, burn it before you die, so nobody can find it and say, "Oh, this is how they were."
Fix it.
But in all seriousness, it's the rewriting of your descriptions that gives you the chance to take out the disgusting words like "just" and allows you to change how you're describing it to be more impactful. And I think that's one thing that's important, is the impact of your, if it's an important description. And if it's not important, why do you have it?
And what you said comes right back to your posit earlier about what makes purple prose. Purple prose is when you're trying to write beauty in the first draft.
Yeah.
Don't.
Oh god.
Like, write your beauty in the second draft. If you're trying to paint this beautiful scene in your first draft, it tends to be overdrawn and unfocused, and it's overwritten to the point that people are starting to laugh at it, and
Yeah.
that's no good. And if you think it's beautiful the first time through, when you read it, it's gonna be bad the second time, because that's how first drafts go.
For those who are listening, and we've talked about purple prose in the past and all that, and I'm not going to point out the episodes. I may lose any Western writers who do want to lynch me after I say this, but if you want a good example of purple prose versus non-purple prose, in the Western genre, Zane Grey is the king, the ranch master, if you will, of purple prose. Meanwhile, and during his time period, that purple prose was allowed. I mean, the man had a successful career. Versus Zane Grey, versus Louis L'Amour, who was more to the punchline, straight to the point. Yeah, it was pulp.
You're dealing with a pulp versus a classic.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a pulp versus slick situation.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I mean, it's similar. Like Melville's Moby Dick is incredibly purple.
Oh yeah.
It's super, super purple. And, you know, we've talked about that before, that his novels would never make it in today's climate and stuff like that, simply because we do strip out so much detail and everything like that.
Sign of the times. Everyone loves Tolkien. Everybody loves Tolkien,
Yeah.
right?
It's hard to get through.
I read Tolkien in high school. I skipped probably the first half of the Two Towers
Oh, yeah.
because it was
Yeah.
all trees. It was constant trees. And once I figured out no one was talking for the next 30 pages, I just skimmed it for important location descriptions. You know, we moved a place. Okay, they're running still. They're going to a place. Okay,
And the new place has trees too.
Yeah, and there's trees there as well.
It's in there. It's those
Yeah.
long montages of them just moving.
But it's and
in the
then
book,
when we
too.
got to dialogue and character, I started reading at my normal pace again. But back in the day, those trees were very interesting to people. That's just a time period thing. You know, we can't yell at the past for not standing up to modern
Tastes.
requirements.
Exactly.
Tastes.
A modern
Reading
taste and modern
speeds.
modern tastes have changed.
Attention spans.
Yeah.
Modern tastes have changed. I'm glad you brought up extended attention span because that's what I was going to talk about. Part of it.
Mm-hmm.
Today, who knows what tomorrow's going to hold? I'll be honest with that. Despite our talk earlier about the automated car.
We're talking about
but
the future of books we can, because I still think that like cool images and moving images in books are a thing.
I'm looking forward to someone aiming a beam at my head and downloading an entire book instantly.
Okay, but
Kung Fu,
From
like,
you or to you?
modern
Matrix style.
your modern day reader versus the original readers of Tolkien, the original readers of Jane Austen, and so forth. We have got, sadly, a lot more distractions in our modern day world. The people who grew up during the previous time periods, actually anybody who grew up and died before Vietnam, actually, did not have 24-hour news. 24-hour news is a modern day thing. Actually, that's post-Vietnam. That was Iraq 1, or Gulf War 1. Vietnam brought in the war into the television set, the real grit of it.
That's a big part of Vietnam. It's a history book lesson.
Exactly. We now have all the social media that out there. Good or bad, I don't care where you stand with that. It's a distraction. All the television shows that we have nowadays. How many channels are out there? I don't know because I cut my cable.
I was going to say, they've all gone away now. It's all streaming online.
Yeah, exactly. And all the movies and everything that just wants to distract and call off your attention. That is calling out your reader's attention as well. So, once again, going back to the Purple Prose, or to borrow from Elmore Leonard, don't write what the reader's going to skip. You have to keep their attention, you have to keep it fast. Right.
Okay, the other thing we haven't actually talked about is actual imagery
Yes.
for your book. And today's day and age, this is actually becoming a much bigger deal. I write for kids, mostly, so that's a whole other side of it. I get to do illustrations in books and illustrations for the books, so that there's like visual compendium to the book, so that a kid can go online or an adult, because I have a lot of those too, go online and look at the pictures and get to kind of engage deeper with the novel that way. It's something I'm actually starting to see pop up more and more in older fiction too. You're starting to see inserts and pictures and things of that nature more and more. So there is a visual element that is definitely entering into words. The covers are huge. Cover art is massive because it is the visual image that everyone is going to associate with your book. So the color tones that are on your book, the character that is on your book, that is directly going to affect what people think of the things going on inside your book. We do judge books by their covers. So, these are all visual clues. And then you also have all your media. So now you have your ads and all of this. And this all now adds into the visual imagery that is created for your book. And by tailoring all of that and controlling all of that and using it all as a branding term almost, then you are kind of laying in another level of the, on a visual level for your book. Not really creating with words; these are actual pictures and stuff like that. But it's a side of the industry that's always been there, really. But I would say now it's almost more important as we all kind of run around trying to get people's attention in this very visual world.
And just to clarify, then I'm going to come over to Fedora. You said older books. I think you mean books for older audiences.
Yes.
That's right. Okay.
Well, I think that the rise of the graphic novel certainly illustrates your entire point. Comic books have grown up.
Illustrates.
Yes.
Put it quite frankly, they have grown up, and they are now novels.
Yes.
They're bigger, and they are appealing to new generations, or perhaps even the older generation.
But the graphic
say
novel
that.
really has come to dominate.
Yes.
A lot of the classic stories, I saw that. A lot of the classic stories have been transformed into graphic novels. I know some of the Jane Austen stuff has been done, and I definitely know The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde has.
And
because I saw that.
Twilight, which is the modern classic of our era.
I was going to say Harry Potter also is now an illustrated book.
Yeah,
The most
both Harry Potter.
there's the illustrated versions of books. Like Harry Potter's put out an illustrated version. I think they're up to the third one now.
Yeah.
I'm sure they'll. I'm wondering if they're gonna do 4 if they haven't done 4 already, because we're starting to get some very thick books.
Yes.
And those illustrated
Well,
versions
people that
just
carry them.
add size. But it's gonna kill a man.
You have to have a red wagon for one book.
It's March now, so March 2018. So that means that A Wrinkle in Time just came out in the movie theater at the
Yes.
beginning of the month. They also, at the same time, have released an illustrated graphic novel version of A Wrinkle in Time. That's not based on the movie. It's based on actually Madeline L'Engle's book. So someone went through and interpreted her book into pictures, which is cool. I'm over here. I make comic books. I write picture books. Relying on images is its own art form. Like graphic novels are its own art form, and they're good and they're fun. I would argue, and I'm not everyone, so this is just my opinion over here. My hot take on graphic novels is graphic novels are fun, but they remove a certain investment from the reader because you're being told directly what to imagine.
This is true.
So writing your book with imagery is still as important as including an image in your book.
Oh, yeah.
You include your image in your book for flavor, and including them is super cool. I take commissions. So please do not stop including images in your books. I put images in my books, but the important part would be you would want someone to be reading your book, come up with their own idea of the character, of the place, of the costumes, of animals or whatever, and then you put an image in, and if the image disagrees with what they've imagined, they should be siding with what they imagined because they're invested.
Yep.
And that's a thing that I worried about when I was putting illustrations of Threadcaster, because I purposefully avoided some descriptions of characters so that people could invent their own. And it's I didn't want to then spoil other people's thoughts, but then I realized, of course, they've read the book. If they care enough about these people, they know who they are. And the image will be like, oh, that's one way I could think of them, turn the page.
Yeah.
And then they keep going with the character they already know. So
This is why I like to do things. Like
Things.
why in Steam Tree it's all things.
Mhm.
All the images
Yeah.
are things.
I like that you're not trying to cut out the reader's imagination. And actually, Jen, you said this earlier about that the story itself it's a partnership between the person writing it and the person reading it.
Mhm.
And I really like that term because that's how it should be.
Yeah,
Is you are attempting to tell them a story, and they are interpreting the story. They're going to interpret it differently than you're telling it a lot of the times, but
Well, your best, the best advertisement you can get for your book is to have someone else tell their friend to read it. And that comes from taking a certain personal ownership in the story. They read it and they decided, I like this. This is now a part of me. I want to share this with my friends. And that's the essence of fandom. That's the essence of all this. You know, all these big franchises everyone gets into. Everyone invests themselves personally in a character or a place or a feeling that they get from those properties, and then that's what fuels the passion, and the passion is what's going to keep people coming back to your writing.
I'm going to pop over to you in just a second. One of my favorite authors never describes her main character. The late P.D. James, or Phyllis Dorothy James, who became the queen of crime in England with her series, the Anne Dalglish series, never describes her character completely. In fact, she admitted in interviews that she herself can't see the character completely. Sees him kind of misty and fogged out. So with that, but yet people have been easily able to figure out what he looks like. Go ahead.
How many times have you heard people say, yeah, I saw the movie, but I like the book better?
Yes.
And that's what we can give them. We can give them that book. Because the movie is a whole bunch of people's interpretation of things that they do visually. We can do it in people's minds. And I think that's a much greater calling.
Now, how many books have you read that at some point the characters are in your grandmother's house? Or
a place that you can identify with
or the
personally.
dog that they describe as one that looks exactly like the dog you grew up with. It's like we're always injecting our own experience into every book.
Yeah.
And writing a picture is to guide those projections in the direction you want it to go without stifling them.
And with that, I can't think of a better ending to this talk. So with that, tune in next week for yet another interesting topic in the writing industry. Thank you for listening. Take care. The new theme songs for Right Pack Radio were written and performed by Meredith Tate. All copyrights remain with her.